Run, simply run, in that hotel room in Williamstown, Massachusetts. I awoke and rubbed my eyes as the dim light of dawn peeked through the slats. It was a little after 6 o'clock. The trail was calling, yet my body ached. I ate cold leftover noodles right out of the container after packing my kit and writing down the last of last night's notes. It wouldn't be gourmet, but it would work. Today, I had to push more than 30 miles. If luck held, Vermont by dusk. Before coffee, the mile and a half back to the Appalachian Trail seemed to go on forever. So I gave the peaceful road a thumbs up. In a matter of minutes, a pickup pulled up next to me and the driver leaned over to open the door. "Hop in," he said. Andre is his name. On my way to work, you return to the Hefting my pack onto the floorboard, I told him, "I'm aiming for a good mileage today." He grinned, giving long-distance hikers the knowing glance that locals give them. I remarked, "You've been at this for a while, about 3,000 meters so far this year." His brows went up. We discussed the trail's rhythm, the scenery, and the weather. After spending so much time alone, it's just little human conversation that seems reassuring. He waved a little as he dropped me off at the trailhead. "Be careful out there." The route greeted me with a refreshing breeze and the sound of a river flowing beside it. The rocks glistened like wet glass, still slick from the rain from the previous night. The rock garden lived up to its moniker. I had to get down on all fours with my palms on the chilly, mossy stone due to a pile of boulders. The landscape opened up after I reached the ridge, but each step required concentration. I was able to upload a few notes with just one bar of service. I feel a little less alone because of that small digital link. I caught up to Sunflower, a day hiker I had met the day before. A few miles later, her stride was leisurely, and her automobile was parked close by. She fell into pace next to me and asked, "How's the trail treating you?" "Not bad," I replied. "However, that rock segment was awful. My goal is to reach the Vermont line." We discussed our arrangements. Her car's camping cadence contrasted with my relentless forward motion. She said, "You're brave doing this alone." I acknowledged that it's liberating, but there are moments when it feels lonely. On my 14th day of the year, we crossed the state line together. I felt a glimmer of pride as I snapped a picture of the green Vermont sign and muddy footwear. I kept going as the grade got steeper. "I'll see you along the way." Throughout the day, more hikers, section trekkers traveling south appeared. I was stopped by a grey-bearded man who went by the name Gazer. He claimed to have hiked back in 2003. "I believe I know Toba, your pal. You're doing fantastic, young one. Continue." Over the next few kilometers of mud and stream crossings, his comments remained with me. It buzzed on my phone. "Iceman, a friend from the trail earlier, was there. Hey," he wrote in his message, "people are still searching, but you haven't found your pendant yet. Brought metal detectors as well. Strangers' generosity has a distinct impact here." I said, "Thanks, man." He responded back, "You guys are amazing. Crossing the road at Route 9. I have food for you." He was waiting and smiling next to his car when I got there. He laughed and held out a tray of hot dogs, lettuce, and a cool drink. It was like a feast. I relished every bite as we sat in the grass and exchanged trail tales. I said, "You have no idea how much this means." He dismissed it, but after being alone for so long, the gesture gave me a feeling of warmth in my chest. I shouldered my load once more at 4 to 3, heading for Vermont's first major test 10 miles uphill. With adrenaline still pumping from the meal and camaraderie, the first several kilometers passed quickly. I felt strong when I passed a tiny bridge close to Bennington. Then I noticed a tiny walk-off way, a sign indicating a shelter, and the spur trail. I turned in that direction when nature called. I saw him at that moment. A man in brilliant orange sat at the picnic table. To still, to pristine. He raised his arm and made a sharp move when he saw me. I initially believed it to be a hunter's signal. I pulled out an earbud. "What? Come here," he commanded. He spoke in a composed tone. Too calm, I paused. "What do you need?" "Please," he repeated in an unyielding tone. "Come on over here. I'm being poisoned by someone. Like stones, The words sank. My instincts all became stiff. The message did not align with his tone. Just control, not panic or urgency. No, yelled my gut. I turned and ran without saying anything more. Cease. As I raced back toward the main trail, branches lashed across my arms as he yelled, "Come back." His voice ripped through the trees. I glanced over my shoulder, but didn't turn around. My heart was pounding, my rucksack was thudding, and the silent woods were now alive with phantom footfall. There was nothing behind me. My lungs burned from running. Perhaps half a mile before I temporarily veered off course and crouched behind a log in an attempt to steal my breath. Every hiker tale I had ever heard raced through my head. Shelters gone wrong, people disappearing. I fumbled my phone out of my pocket, my hands trembling. I didn't make a police call, not initially. That may take hours out here. I gave Dad a call. "It's me, Dad," I gasped. "What's the issue? You sound strange." At the shelter, there was a man, waved at me, claimed that he was being poisoned. When I ran, he yelled, "I'm all right." I was just terrified. He became aware at once. Where precisely? Name of shelter. What did he have on? I told him what I could. Orange clothing on the way north from Bennington. He firmly said, "I'll call it in. You continue to move. If anything changes, give me a call." Exhaustion replaced the exhilaration. My legs felt unsteady and heavy. I recoiled so violently that I almost fell when a trail runner emerged behind me. He paused and said, "Whoa, you good?" I apologized, gasping for air. The strange man at the shelter made an attempt to persuade me to visit, said a bizarre thing. "Take caution." With wide eyes, he said, "Thanks for the heads up. I'll inform others." In first round, calls began to come in. "I've heard you had a scare. Are you all right?" I tried to laugh it off and said, "Barely." "Your dad called," said the Forest Service officer. "We are currently on our way there." "Give another description about him." Yes, I did. Each and every detail was engraved in my memory. The setting, the orange jacket, and the soothing voice. "You did right running," he remarked. "Well, give it a look." Continue heading north. Deep drifts of snow remained on the ground by the time I arrived in Goddard. My legs were soaked to the thighs with every step that pushed through. The post-holing was cruel, sluggish, frigid, and never-ending. My stockings squished in the freezing water, and my feet felt numb. Darkness quickly descended. The Kidgore shelter was deserted when I eventually arrived. It was just me, the wind, and the little sound of trees creaking. I let go of my pack and sat on the wooden platform. Trembling from everything that had transpired as well as the cold, I sipped from my water bottle, ate a handful of trail mix, and used stiff fingers to write in my journal. I could still hear the man's voice. "Come on over here. I'm being poisoned by someone." I later learned through updates that he was discovered dead, perhaps poisoned, as he had said. Nothing could have chilled me more than that fact. You quickly discover that instinct is protection rather than paranoia out here in the quiet and loneliness. And I could have been saved that day if I had listened to it. The thirst's edge. I had always enjoyed challenging myself. At the age of 39, I entered the 6-day, 251-kilometer marathon to Sabil in 1994, which took place in Morocco's sweltering Sahara Desert. There was a reason it was dubbed the toughest foot race on earth. Food, equipment, and the will to live were all carried on your back. Cynthia's eyes said more than words could on the morning I left Italy. Her voice was shaking as she held me close. "Make a vow to use caution. Mauro." In a whisper, she said, "The desert doesn't forgive mistakes." "I'll be fine," I answered, grinning and giving her a kiss. "I've trained for this." Giovanni, my running buddy, and I chuckled as we crossed the finish line together. I had no idea how far fate was going to take me. The initial days were practically blissful. 80 of us started out as a single, resolute line slicing across the dunes, but we quickly dispersed throughout the immense expanse. I rationed dried food, counted every calorie, and maintained a steady pace while drinking water at checkpoints. I was in 7th place by day 3, having traveled about 100 kilometers. Giovanni had fallen behind, but I kept going because I felt powerful and unstoppable, as if I had finally reached the brink of something bigger than myself. Day 4, which was the longest stage, more than 80 kilometers, came next. To save time, I started early and cut through a number of low dunes. At first, the horizon seemed boundless and the sky was clear. However, the wind began to speed up around lunchtime, turning from a whisper to a roar. The air thickened until I could hardly breathe, and the sand started to sting my face. Squinting through the storm, I wrapped my scarf around my nose. Visibility seemed disappeared. My outstretched hand was no longer there. I mindlessly went forward, certain that the course markings must be there in front of me. For 8 unrelenting hours, the sandstorm persisted. I felt sick to my stomach as I gazed around. When it finally cleared close to twilight, nothing was present. There are no footsteps, flags, or sounds other than the wind. Just the wide, silent, and ruthless desert. I scanned every way as I ascended a dune. Nothing. I had no idea where I was. I resisted the growing fear. I followed the race rules and stayed put if I got lost. My sleeping bag included a few food leftovers and a liter of water. As the desert called, I sought refuge in a little shrub and hugged myself tightly. The hiss of moving sand was the only sound that broke the oppressive calm. I muttered, "They'll find me soon. They possess helicopters." But nobody showed up, and the night went on forever. By daybreak, I was ravenous like a beast. I resumed walking while hoping for a sign, a signpost, or anything. As the sun climbed higher, my flesh was scorched. I ran out of water, knowing that I would have to drink the urine later. I filled an empty bottle with it while looking at it disgustedly. As I ascended dune after dune, all I saw was more sand. Then there was a slight thudding in the sky. A chopper. My heart skipped a beat. I fired my signal flare and waved, a vivid red streak that was hardly visible in the harsh daylight. The helicopter continued to fly after passing overhead. I was not seen by it. That's when hopelessness struck. Sand slipped between my fingers as I fell to my knees. Nobody is aware of my location. I thought I may stumble back toward the trail, so I waited out the heat before setting my compass west. Hours became a jumble of heat and agony. By late afternoon, I noticed a structure, a shape on the horizon. I made me move my legs. It revealed out to be an old marabout, a little, dilapidated Muslim shrine with shade. That night, I passed out inside. I had to deal with a new reality. My last meal is gone, and I'm almost out of water. I used urine as fuel to light my fire and cook the last of the ration crumbs. I forced it down despite the intolerable stench. Before I saw bats roosting in the shadows of the ceiling. Hunger tore at me. I bit on the raw flesh of a few that I had captured with my knife. It was disgusting and metallic, yet it kept me alive. In that spot that resembled a tomb, days blended together. As a signal, or perhaps as a grave monument, I placed my little Italian flag on the roof. I used a bit of charcoal to write a parting message to Cynthia and our kids on the wall. I adore you. I apologize for not returning home. I heard a plane's engine one afternoon. As I went outdoors, arranging rocks into an SOS and flaming the straps of my bag to create smoke, my heart raced. But then another sandstorm appeared, destroying everything, as if to make fun of me. My body started to shut down by the 4th day. My skin broke. My urine became dark and thick. I was no longer able to think coherently. Tears mixed with dust as I laid on the ground. I reasoned that it would be wiser to terminate it now. Cynthia will receive the pension, at least. I sliced my wrists with my knife. The agony was intense, but oddly far away. I bided my time till night fell. However, morning arrived. I was still alive. My blood could not flow because it was too thick. The wounds had clotted. I let out a dry, hollow laugh as I looked at my wrists. I reasoned that I was destined to live if I couldn't even die. At that point, something changed. I gathered what little power I still had, ripped shreds from my shirt to patch the wounds, and resumed my journey. I rested throughout the scorching hours and strolled at dawn and dusk. I consumed insects and little snakes I collected at night, chewed on roots, and drank dew. Any day turned into a minute-by-minute struggle, and any advancement was a triumph. Mortgages teased me at times. glistening havens that disappeared as soon as I got there. My feet were bleeding and burned. The silence broke my psyche. I was always talking to myself. Morrow. One more dune. One more. Consider the children. After almost 9 days, I came upon a filthy pool, a small oasis, and a patch of green. I fell to my knees and used shaky hands to scoop water. My body rejected the jolt of dampness, causing me to throw up the first mouthful. However, I persisted until it remained down. I sobbed with relief. Then I noticed something in the sand. Goat excrement. Next, footprints. My heart pounded feebly. I followed them till I came across a young child, maybe 8 years old. Injuring goats. Water, I croaked. Assist, she shouted, opening her eyes wide, and ran off. My voice cracked as I cried out, wait. She came back a few minutes later with an elderly woman, possibly her grandmother. The woman gave me a tired, yet sympathetic look. She motioned for me to come along. I followed her instructions and staggered to a little camp. I drank the goat's milk slowly, followed by mint tea. I was scarcely able to talk. They covered me with blankets and attended to my wounds. I was placed onto a camel and transported to a military station by the men upon their return. The military initially suspected me of being a spy. I was questioned in French while wearing a blindfold. Who are you? One made a demand. I rasped, Moro Prosperi. The Italian runner was defeated. They drove me to a hospital in Tindouf, Algeria. After verifying my account, I had veered off course by about 300 kilometers. I was given 16 liters of liquids by the physicians. My liver was failing. I had dropped 16 kilograms, or over 25% of my body weight. However, I was still alive. Cynthia's voice broke with shock when I eventually contacted her. They said you were gone, Morrow. I was crying uncontrollably. I'm returning home. I claimed to have survived. I was forever altered by 9 days spent by myself in the desert. I lost everything in the Sahara, including my pride, strength, and terror, until my survival instinct was all that remained. Despite going through hell, I managed to return, and occasionally, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the wind of that never-ending sea of searing sand and recall how near I was to merging with it. 10 additional steps. I could not even begin to count the number of times I had hiked those trails, the ones that wind through the forests and valleys only a short distance from home. I was drawn to move, breathe peaceful air, and feel the ground beneath my boots once more that afternoon. I brought light, some food, a towel, and a belt-mounted pepper spray. It was a familiar reserve, a river slicing across the lowlands and a tangle of verdant hills. There aren't any actual risks there. Birds, breeze, and silence. No cougars, no bears. I parked at the trailhead, followed the dirt road, and signed in at the entry. The slope started out steeply, zigzagging through long grass into denser forests where sunlight split into shards. I strolled slowly, taking in the moist aroma of the woodland and the whispery sound of leaves rustling. I was pulled off the main track by a minor path that led to the long-abandoned wooden lookout on stilts. Its empty windows, which stared out like hollow eyes, always made me uneasy. However, curiosity triumphed once more. I went past it, went across to the river, and undressed to swim in the chilly pools. My skin was startled awake by the water. There was nothing but the ripple of my breath beneath the surface. After floating for a bit, I perched on a smooth rock and watched the current pass while eating an apple. On the distant bank, 2 figures emerged and continued on. I had the place to myself once more as their footsteps subsided. I started back down the level trail of the river after getting dressed and drying off. The jungle was motionless, the shadows growing longer. I halted when I turned to face the trail leading up to the ridge. Ahead were 2 men. They had dogs running amok, no packs, no appropriate boots, and they weren't hikers. Here, dogs were not permitted. They swiftly turned and went in the other direction as soon as they saw me. Poachers came to mind initially. They had been a problem lately, creeping in to snare whatever they could or chasing wildlife. I gave them some space for a few minutes before moving on. Once more, They were waiting as the trail wound past a stand of trees. As I got closer, they grinned too casually. I tried to sound calm. I said, "I hope you're not poaching." One gave a head shake. "No, we're trying to find our dog. Somewhere I lost one." I didn't trust him. Nevertheless, I nodded and went by, intending to go to my car quickly and report at the gate. The trail became narrower, surrounded by bushes. I heard a dog's gentle panting, hearing footsteps behind me. I turned to see it sniffing close at my heels. I said, "Call your dog." Over my shoulder, no answer. Then I heard a low voice closer than I had anticipated. "You'll perish here if you don't give us your stuff." My hands became chilly. I didn't turn, still strapped at my side. I went for the pepper spray. My thoughts were racing. Avoid running. Avoid freezing. Consider. Footsteps crunched faster. The second man approached me from the side. His voice was nearly soft. He declared, "I want sex. Please. I want to have sex." "No." I spoke in a strong tone. "I'm not familiar with you. Don't bother me." His fingertips brushed my arm as he stretched for me. Next, lower. I felt something tighten inside of me. I pointed past them and said, "Go. Before I hurt you, leave." They smiled. Their eyes no longer had a playful expression. With my heart pounding and every nerve alive, I resumed walking. A rush of boots behind me was the next sound I heard. Next, impact. Arms clamped around my waist as a body crashed against my back. Refusing to fall, I twisted. Reflexes from years of boxing are starting to kick in. I gave a forceful elbow and whirled away. One yelled, "Give us sex or we'll kill you." His fist cracked into my cheekbone in the first swift blow. Behind my eye, white pain erupted. I struck back, making a firm connection with his jaw with my left hook. He faltered. I pulled out the pepper spray and shot, but the mist spread widely. They both lunged at me after the second man knocked it out of my hand. There were fists, groans, shoving, and mayhem. I went for anything soft, like eyes or necks. One grabbed my arm and forcefully pulled me down, crushing me into the ground as his boot smashed on my cheek and my face struck dirt. "Don't scream," he said. I hadn't, not quite yet. Now, though, I did it loudly, rough, and with a torn throat. Distance swallowed the sound as it disappeared into the valley. The second man was clearly intent as he crouched between my knees and tore at cloth with his fingers. Terror struck with clarity, coldness, and depth. A refusal that was vivid and unadulterated rushed forth. I kicked him hard in the chest while drawing my knee back. Gasping, he flew backward. The boot lifted off my face. I climbed to my feet after rolling and kicking once more. One whispered, "Let's just go. Ignore it." With their canines chasing after them, they fled, snatching my backpack. With blood in my lips and dirt all over my face, I fell to my knees, trembling. My ribs burned, and my eye throbbed. I coiled little and crawled into dense undergrowth, amplifying every sound. The sound of a twig snapping and the wind hissing through books. Were they returning? I had no idea. In a swirl of panic and heartbeat, minutes or perhaps hours went by. I was unable to stay. I trusted them when they threatened to murder me. I forced myself to stand, located a slope covered with vines and thorns, and started to climb. Where I held rock and root, my hands bled. However, I continued. There were two voices within. "I'm tired," the little one said. "I am unable to." Calm and motherly. "You can keep going," said the other. 10 more steps. Like prayers, I counted those steps. I stumbled into a clearing at the top. A water tap shining in the sunlight. Newwood shelters. I first hid and listened. Nothing. I drank after that. The water tastes like salvation as you take slow gulps. I knew better than to give in. The sun was setting. Up through dry grass, I followed the thin route until it came to a dirt road. Now that every bruise was alive, my body screamed. Even though my bag and keys were gone, I continued to walk along the middle of the road while holding a spear-like stick. An engine came up from behind. I turned and waved. Automobile with a couple inside slowed down. When she saw me, her eyes widened and she rolled down the window. "Please," I murmured. "I've been attacked," she exclaimed. Did they rape you?" My voice broke as I said, "No, but they made an effort. They drove me home to my mother's house and assisted me in getting in. There was an extra key I had. My automobile was later retrieved by them. Physicians at the hospital traced the marks. I have finger-shaped bruises on my arms and boot tread on my cheek. My description and statements were taken by the police. I could still clearly recall every feature of their faces, including those menacing smiles. I didn't get much sleep 4 days. 3s and occasionally 4s of showers fell. My chest constricted in crowds. However, I made myself return to the reserve, with buddies this time. For a brief while, the fear subsided as we ascended the cliffs over the same valley. That day, they had stolen something from me. Safety and tranquility, but not everything. I engaged in combat. I turned to leave. Years later, the memory is still hazy. The sound of their laughter, the dirt in my teeth, the dog's breath on my legs, the jagged stone in my palm while I climbed, and the shock of cold water on my tongue. The speed at which tranquility gives way to dread is terrifying. How a single turn in the path can transform a person's life. However, I don't recall the fear the most when I look back. I recall the voice telling me to keep going during the ascent. I had also run. I went home on foot. I had also run. I went home on foot. The adherent 4 weeks, I had been anticipating that camping trip by myself. The kind of work that leaves you staring at walls and wanting to temporarily vanish has been exhausting. I therefore made the decision to entirely disconnect and travel to one of those abandoned woodland pockets in the back country of Washington where nobody ever goes. I brought food, a map, a compass, a small knife fastened to my belt, and the lightweight but clever tent. Drove out before dawn, the road narrowing into an old, partially overgrown logging trail after winding through miles of fog and forest. I parked near a pull-off, went outside into an almost deafening silence, and began to hike. I had traveled roughly 10 miles by mid-afternoon. The trail disappeared into moist, ancient-smelling dirt and mossy trees, nestled amid thick firs. I discovered a level space close to a tiny brook that was ideal for camping. The air was still, chilly, and clean. As the woodland grew darker, I constructed a little fire, cooked some beans, and watched the flames crackle low. There was complete silence as I eventually zipped into my tent. There was only a slight trickle of water around. No automobiles, no planes. I quickly fell asleep. I was startled awake at some point after midnight. Soft, rustling, but purposefully close. I initially believed it to be a deer or raccoon prying. I paid attention. Just past the tent, leisurely crunching leaves and steady steps. I flipped on my headlamp and opened the flap an inch. A man was seated where my fire had been. His face was dimly lighted by the beam as he knelt low and prodded the ashes with a stick. Sitting there in jeans and a dark hoodie without a pack or camping equipment. His eyes were wide enough for a pulse when he turned to face the light. Then he raced, shot up, and crashed through the darkness, disappearing into the trees. "Hey," I yelled, my voice breaking. "What are you doing?" "Nothing, just the sound of branches settling." With my headlamp darting across shadows and the silence closing in once more, I sat motionless. I eventually persuaded myself that it didn't matter. Perhaps a drifter got lost or drunk and wandered by accident. I didn't get much sleep the remainder of the night, though. I looked around in the morning. No distinct footprints. It was excessively dry on the ground. I swiftly set up camp and ventured off any designated track. Perhaps 5 miles farther into the bush, discovered another location along a ridge with an expansive view of the never-ending forest. There, far from where that man had come from, it felt better, wide and light. Silently, the day went by. I read by the stream, went exploring, and gathered some berries. Once more, the forest was serene, almost compassionate. I began to think that I had overreacted. I made another little fire that evening and waited for the last glow to go out. Through the branches, the stars were sharply visible. I heard it again at midnight, gentle motion in the shadows. However, it wasn't random this time. It went around. Twigs broke. One of the branches creaked. moving about my camp with deliberate steps. Who is present? For a moment, I yelled, "Quiet." Then came the steady, quiet, and overly composed voice of a man from the shadows. "Do you know how to get to Eagle Pass?" I froze. "What? Eagle Pass?" He repeated himself. "Do you know how to go there?" I answered cautiously. "I don't." "Did you lose?" "Perhaps." He hesitated. "You've spent a lot of time out here." My throat constricted. "A few days." "Do you require assistance?" "No," he replied. My eyes are bothered by light. I looked at the trees with my flashlight. Just shadows and trunks. "Have you noticed any historic cabins along this route?" Next, he inquired. "Those with red doors?" I initially didn't respond. The query seemed overly specific and odd. "Are there no cabins nearby?" Finally, I said. "Why?" He didn't respond. "Moved closer just now." "However, what about the large boulders at the river fork? Do you know how to get from here to there?" He asked me each question slowly, as if he were testing me. My skin crawled. He said, "You alone out here?" I paused. I promptly said, "Yeah," which I later regretted. "But friends know where I am." A faint laugh drifted out of the shadows. "Good to have friends." That broke something in me. He was 20 feet distant, partially concealed behind a trunk, when I lifted the flashlight and vigorously swept it across the trees. The same hoodie and jeans. The same man from the first evening. My stomach fell. How on earth had he discovered me? I had gone on haphazard hikes. No signage, no pathway. There was no way. The laser struck his face, causing him to shudder before darting off once more and disappearing into the darkness. "Stay away from me," I yelled. My voice sounded pointless. With trembling hands, I quickly dismantled my tent and prepared to depart. But it was completely dark. No moon. No obvious route. With a knife in my hand, I sat up all night listening to the dwindling fire. I didn't sleep at all, but nothing came. I packed everything and headed back toward my car at daybreak, traveling quickly, doubling back, and pausing every few minutes to observe the terrain. The vastness and tranquility of the woods were vanished. They experienced claustrophobia. My heart turns over with each rustling. After stopping to recuperate 8 miles in, I made a makeshift camp amid a thicket. This time, there is no fire. I waited and listened while I lay there in the dark. I heard footsteps once again at around 2 in the morning. Circle my tent slowly and steadily. "I know you're there," I muttered. "Go away from me." There was silence, followed by purposeful movement around and around. I could hardly hear my heartbeat. He was teasing me. I tightened my hold on the knife and held my breath till the sound eventually subsided. It got worse the following day. I imagined him following me every step. My lungs ached and my legs burned, but I continued. I muttered, "Just get to the car. Proceed to the vehicle." I tried to sleep again that night, since I was too tired to continue. However, it wasn't footsteps this time. There was a distant sound. An owl's call is simply incorrect. Too human, too drawn out. Then there was a faint whistle coming from somewhere else. Then again, nearer. He was now signaling by imitating birds. "What do you want?" I shouted. In the darkness, my voice broke. No response. It was the same distorted call, but it sounded gentler and almost fun. I started hiking before the sun came up. Despite the rubbery feeling in my legs, I continued. I nearly started crying when I eventually burst through the trees and saw my car's roof shining along the logging road. I stumbled and hammered as I ran the final half mile. I threw my equipment inside, closed the doors, and locked them all when I got there. Then, with dust billowing behind me like smoke, I drove quickly without turning around. The forest vanished in the rearview mirror. As I walked away, I half expected to see him emerge from the trees and observe me. I continued till an hour later, when I came to a town. I finally let myself breathe after checking into a motel and locking the door. I never returned to those forests. Later, I told a buddy about the strange meeting, omitting the details. What could I possibly say? That a man spent 3 nights pursuing me through the wilderness while inquiring about non-existent locations. No harm has been done, and there is no proof. However, I am aware of what I heard. I am aware of what I witnessed, and I am aware that I would not have survived at all if I had spent even one more night there. Survived at all if I had spent even one more night there.